On February 20, 1945, Japanese defenders positioned in the northern sector of Iwo Jima witnessed something that would fundamentally alter the nature of Pacific warfare. Strange American tanks approached through the volcanic ash, trailing black smoke that seemed different from battle damage. As these vehicles turned their turrets toward concrete bunkers, observers noticed something unprecedented where main guns should have been. Modified barrels with distinctive nozzles. The mechanical hiss that followed, like compressed air escaping under tremendous pressure, preceded a torrent of burning fuel that erupted across 150 yards of volcanic terrain, engulfing neighboring pillboxes in napalm-thickened death. These 8 modified Sherman tanks represented months of secret development at Schofield Barracks in Hawaii, where Navy Construction Battalion personnel had worked around the clock to marry American industrial capability with battlefield necessity. What emerged would be called by one Marine battalion commander the best single weapon of the operation. Though the psychological cost would on survivors on both sides for decades, the Imperial Japanese Army had spent an entire year transforming Iwo Jima into the most formidable defensive position in the Pacific. General Tadamichi Kuribayashi, appointed to command the island's defense in June 1944, understood with crystalline clarity that he could not defeat the Americans. His mission was fundamentally different: make the capture of Iwo Jima so costly that the United States would reconsider invading the Japanese homeland. Kuribayashi had studied the failures at Saipan, Peleliu, and the Philippines, where traditional Japanese defensive tactics of meeting enemies at the water's edge and launching massive banzai charges had proven catastrophic for ineffective against American firepower. The general made a revolutionary decision that broke with centuries of samurai tradition. There would be no glorious charges, no warriors seeking honorable death in open combat. Instead, his 21,000 men would fight from underground, turning Iwo Jima into a subterranean killing field. By February 1945, Japanese engineers had completed 11 miles of interconnected tunnels, with plans for 17 miles total. The completed sections reached 7 stories deep into volcanic rock, with 5,000 caves and underground chambers carved out, many large enough to hold 300 to 400 men. 1,500 fortified positions dotted the landscape. Concrete bunkers with walls 4 feet thick, reinforced with steel rods salvaged from abandoned construction projects, crowned every strategic height. Each position was carefully sited to provide interlocking fields of fire, ensuring every inch of the island's surface could be swept by Japanese guns hidden behind steel doors that opened only to fire, then sealed shut against retaliation. The tunnel system itself was an engineering marvel. Ventilation shafts disguised as natural rock formations provided fresh air, while underground hospitals with operating theaters were equipped to handle 400 wounded. Communications centers buried 75 feet below ground coordinated defensive operations through miles of telephone wire, and storage chambers held enough rice, water, and ammunition for a 2-month siege. At Schofield Barracks, Hawaii, 5 months before the invasion, Colonel George F. Unmat assembled a team that would revolutionize armored warfare in the Pacific. Unmat, a career Army officer with 44 years of military service, commanded the U.S. Army Chemical Warfare Service's most secret project in the Central Pacific area. His mission: develop a weapon system capable of neutralizing Japanese cave and bunker complexes that had proven immune to conventional weapons. The colonel's initial team was small, just the 43rd Chemical Laboratory Company. But understanding the magnitude of his task required exceptional talent. Unmat requisitioned 25 men from the 117th Naval Construction Battalion, whose mechanical genius and practical engineering skills were legendary throughout the Pacific. He added personnel from the 5th Marine Tank Battalion and the 81st Ordnance Company, creating a unique joint service team united by a single purpose: build a weapon that could burn the Japanese out of their caves. Leading the technical development were machinist mate, 1st Class A, Reacher and electrician's mate 2nd Class Joseph Kell. 2 construction battalion personnel whose names would never appear in headlines, but whose innovation would save thousands of American lives. These men brought practical battlefield experience from previous island campaigns, having seen Marines die trying to assault fortified positions that artillery couldn't destroy. They understood the problem wasn't firepower. It was applying that firepower effectively against an enemy fighting from underground. The challenge was daunting. Previous attempts to mount flamethrowers on tanks had produced mixed results. The Army's initial designs were crude field modifications, essentially portable flamethrowers bolted onto tank hulls. The Canadian Ronson system, of which the Marines had acquired 30 units, had range limited to 60 to 80 yards with thickened fuel, with fuel capacity allowing only 30 to 40 seconds of total fire. The weapons were maintenance nightmares that frequently malfunctioned in combat, with failure rates exceeding 40% in field conditions. Through military channels that reached the highest levels, UNMAC's team located 8 M4A3 Sherman medium tanks available for conversion. These tanks displaced 35 tons, powered by a 500 horsepower Ford GA V8 engine, with armor ranging from 25 to 76 millimeters thickness. The Shermans had proven their durability in European combat and possessed the armor protection necessary to survive Japanese anti-tank fire. The real innovation came when Richer and Kell decided to combine the best elements from 3 existing flamethrower systems, the British Ronson, the Navy Mark I, and captured German designs from North Africa. Working 20-hour days in the Hawaiian heat, sleeping in shifts beside their welding equipment, the construction battalion personnel began creating something unprecedented. The resulting weapon, designated CBH-1TAS, Construction Battalion Hawaii WEN, represented a quantum leap in flamethrower technology. Installation required 150 pounds of welding rod and 100 electrical connections, each one critical to the weapon's function. The conversion took funds 200 man-hours per tank, with 150 parts specially machined by construction battalion metalworkers. Each conversion cost between 20,000 and 25,000, equivalent to 60,000 in modern currency. The technical specifications were revolutionary. The CBH-1 operated at 300 pounds per square inch pressure, at triple that of previous designs. Maximum range extended to 150 yards with thickened fuel, nearly 3 times the distance of portable flamethrowers. The fuel mixture, a carefully calibrated blend of diesel fuel, gasoline, and napalm thickener developed by the 43rd Chemical Laboratory, would burn at 500 degrees Fahrenheit. The system could maintain continuous fire for up to 80 seconds, though doctrine recommended bursts of 2 to 3 seconds to conserve fuel and maintain accuracy. Most critically, the flamethrower replaced the tank's main gun, allowing full traverse of 270 degrees and elevation from -10 to +35 degrees through the tank's existing fire control systems. The gunner could aim the flame weapon as accurately as a conventional cannon using the same periscope and controls, meaning tank crews required minimal additional training to operate the new weapon effectively. The 8 M4A3 flamethrower tanks landed on Iwo Jima's beaches on February 19, D-Day, mixed among the regular Sherman tanks of the 4th and 5th Tank Battalions. They came ashore in the 5th wave around 1,000 hours after the beaches had been marginally secured, with Navy orders specifying they remain in reserve during the initial assault, while Marine commanders assessed the tactical situation before committing these valuable and irreplaceable assets. For the first 24 hours, the flamethrower tanks sat idle near the beach while Marines died by the hundreds, trying to advance against invisible Japanese positions. The volcanic ash, which rose to the top of a man's calf with each step, made infantry movement exhausting. Conventional tactics were failing catastrophically. Naval gunfire couldn't penetrate bunkers buried under 10 feet of volcanic rock and concrete. Artillery shells exploded harmlessly against positions designed to withstand direct hits from 16-inch naval guns, and Marine riflemen found themselves attacking fortifications that might as well have been solid mountains. On the morning of February 20th, the situation was desperate. The 21st Marine Regiment was pinned down attempting to cross Motoyama Airfield No. 1, with 3 concrete pillboxes dominating the approach through interlocking machine gun fire that created a kill zone 200 yards wide. 2 rifle companies had already been decimated attempting frontal assaults, and the regiment had suffered 35% casualties in less than 40 hours. Lieutenant Colonel William Duplantis, commanding the 3rd Battalion, 21st Marines, made the decision that would change the battle's trajectory. He called for the Flamethrower tanks. At 14:20 hours, the first M4A3R3 Flamethrower tank entered combat. Tank number 431, commanded by Staff Sergeant Robert Meiser, a veteran of Saipan and Tinian, approached the Japanese positions from an oblique angle, using destroyed Japanese aircraft as cover. To Japanese observers, it appeared to be another standard Sherman attempting the same failed assault. At 125 yards from the nearest pillbox, Meiser gave the order. Flamethrower. Pillbox. Fire. The CBH-1 flamethrower erupted with a sound witnesses described as the devil's own blowtorch. A stream of napalm-thickened fuel oil asked through the air, propelled by compressed nitrogen, striking the pillbox aperture with devastating accuracy and splashing through the machine gun port to flow inside like lava. The effect was instantaneous and horrifying. Temperatures inside the concrete structure soared past 200 degrees Fahrenheit in seconds. Oxygen was consumed so rapidly that Japanese soldiers suffocated before the flames reached them, and those who survived the initial blast attempted to flee through rear exits only to be cut down by Marine riflemen positioned for exactly this eventuality. Within 6 hours, all 8 flamethrower tanks were in action across the front. The tactical revolution was immediate and profound. Tank crews developed techniques like corkscrew and burn, approaching in spiral patterns to avoid anti-tank fire while maintaining continuous flame suppression. The psychological effect was as devastating as the physical destruction. Japanese soldiers, who had been trained to die at their posts, began fleeing positions when they saw flame tanks approaching, abandoning fortifications rather than face incineration. By nightfall on February 20th, Marine units were already modifying their tactics around flamethrower tank availability. Attack plans were postponed until flame tanks could be brought forward. Infantry units learned to follow 50 yards behind the tanks, close enough to exploit the shock effect, but far enough to avoid heat blast that could singe eyebrows of 30 yards, and artillery observers began marking targets specifically for flamethrower engagement, rather than conventional bombardment. The numbers from the first day of flame tank combat were striking: 47 fortified positions destroyed, Marine casualties in supported sectors down 40% from the previous day, and 600 yards of territory gained in areas that had been static for 48 hours. But the most significant statistic was psychological. For the first time, significant numbers of Japanese soldiers were abandoning positions rather than dying at their posts. The Japanese response was swift but largely ineffective. General Kuribayashi issued emergency orders designating flame tanks as priority targets, with all available 47mm anti-tank guns to concentrate fire on these vehicles and special assault teams organized from volunteers who would attack with explosive charges strapped to their bodies. But the fundamental problem remained insurmountable. The flamethrower tanks looked identical to regular Shermans until they fired, meaning Japanese gunners couldn't identify priority targets until it was too late. On February 23rd, the same day, Marines raised the flag on Mount Suribachi, the Flamethrower tanks faced their greatest test when the 3rd Marine Division attempted to capture Hill 382, the second highest point on Iwo Jima and cornerstone of Kuribayashi's northern defenses. The hill was honeycombed with bunkers and tunnels, reaching 7 stories underground, with Japanese defenders having pre-registered every approach with artillery and mortars. At around 800 hours, 4 flamethrower tanks advanced in echelon formation, supported by 6 conventional Shermans and a battalion of Marine infantry. This time, the Japanese were ready with hidden 75mm mountain guns positioned specifically to engage flame tanks. As the lead flame tank crested the first rise, concentrated fire erupted from 3 concealed positions, with the first round striking tank Fortune 33's track and immobilizing it. The crew continued firing the flamethrower while stationary, creating a curtain of flame that obscured following vehicles and suppressed Japanese positions, allowing other tanks to maneuver through the sacrifice. The battle also revealed flamethrower tank limitations. Tank number 431 exhausted its fuel supply after 80 seconds of continuous operation, requiring withdrawal to designated areas where specialized fuel trucks waited, a process that took 2 hours minimum, during which Japanese defenders could reinforce and reorganize. The tanks were powerful but not inexhaustible. By early March, the battle had shifted to Iwo Jima's northern plateau, a hellscape of sulfur pits, twisted ravines, and volcanic rock formations that made tank operations nearly impossible. Unable to maneuver freely, the flamethrower tanks became mobile pillboxes positioned at key points to support infantry advances, with Marine engineers working through the night constructing ramps and clearing paths to allow flame tanks to reach positions previously thought inaccessible. On March 8, tank number 436 achieved what crews called the impossible shot, supporting the 9th Marines' face. Fountain Cushman's calculated that Khalil Foster calculated that flames at the flame fire at maximum elevation might arc or dislodge over the cliff edge and fall into Japanese positions from above. With the tank precariously balanced on rubble and enemy mortar rounds falling around them, Gunner Corporal Anthony Vitelli triggered the flamethrower. The molten napalm arsed high into the air, seemed to hang for a moment at its apex, then cascaded down into the Japanese positions with devastating effect. By mid-March, the flamethrower tanks had evolved into the centerpiece of a combined arms system, with each flame tank operating with a dedicated support team. Conventional tanks for suppressing enemy anti-tank guns, infantry for close protection against suicide attackers, engineers for obstacle clearance, and ammunition carriers bringing forward the 300-gallon fuel trailers that extended operational time. The crescendo came during the final week of March as Marines pushed into the Gorge, Kuribayashi's last stronghold. On March 21st, all operational flamethrower tanks, 6 of the original 8, with 2 under repair, concentrated for a coordinated assault reinforced by 4 additional flame tanks rushed from Hawaii. The assault began at 1,000 hours with tanks advancing in crescent formation, creating overlapping fields of flame that left no dead space for Japanese defenders to exploit. By sunset on March 21st, the gorge had been penetrated. Over 800 Japanese defenders lay dead, many burned beyond recognition, while the flamethrower tanks had consumed 8,000 gallons of fuel mixture in a single day. Marine casualties, while still significant at 90, 2 killed and 257 wounded, were a fraction of what conventional assault would have cost. On March 26, 1945, Iwo Jima was declared secure. The battle had lasted 36 days instead of the projected 5, with American casualties totaling 26,038, including 6,821 killed, numbers that shocked the American public and military leadership alike. Japanese losses were nearly total of approximately the 4,000 defenders. Only 216 survived as prisoners, with the rest dying fighting or, in increasing numbers as the battle progressed, by suicide rather than face capture or death by flame. Post-action analysis credited the flamethrower tanks with reducing American casualties by an estimated 5,000 men. They had destroyed over 1,000 fortified positions, consumed 360,000 gallons of fuel mixture, and fundamentally changed Marine Corps' assault doctrine. Over 30% of Japanese casualties on Iwo Jima were caused by flame weapons, both tank-mounted and portable, while in sectors where flame tanks operated, the rate of advance increased by 300% compared to unsupported attacks. The tactical implications extended far beyond Iwo Jima. The Marine Corps immediately requested 54 additional flamethrower tanks for future operations, while Colonel Unmark's team at Sofield Barracks went into overdrive production. By June 1945, 70 new flame tanks were ready for Operation Downfall. The planned invasion of Japan, though the war's end would make their use unnecessary. The flamethrower tanks represented something more than a new weapon. They embodied the transformation of warfare from individual courage to industrial capability. The construction battalion personnel who had created these weapons received little public recognition, their names forgotten except in obscure technical reports. Yet their innovation had saved thousands of American lives and shortened one of the Pacific War's bloodiest battles. Tank crews faced different challenges, with many struggling with what would later be recognized as post-traumatic stress disorder. The memory of human beings turned to ash, of screams cut short by consuming flame, haunted men who had done what duty demanded. Veterans formed their own informal support network after the war, meeting annually in Hawaii to share experiences too terrible for civilian understanding. The Japanese perspective emerged slowly through prisoner interrogations and captured documents. Soldiers who had been taught that death in battle guaranteed spiritual transcendence found themselves paralyzed by fear of incineration. The dishonor of fleeing from combat positions seemed preferable to dying in underground ovens, contributing to the first large-scale surrenders in Japanese military history. Lieutenant Yamada, who had witnessed the first flamethrower tank attack on February 20th and survived as one of the 216 prisoners, reflected in post-war testimony. We had prepared for every form of death. Bullets, shells, bayonets, starvation. We had not prepared for burning petroleum that sought us out in our deepest bunkers. The flame tanks broke our spirit in ways no conventional weapon could. General Kuribayashi's final message, transmitted just before his death in March 1945, contained a prescient observation. The Americans have not just defeated us with superior numbers or firepower. They have defeated us with superior imagination, turning our greatest strength, our underground fortifications, into death traps. Future wars will belong to nations that can imagine new forms of warfare, not those who perfect old ones. The 8 flamethrower tanks of Iwo Jima had achieved something remarkable in 36 days of combat. They had validated a new form of warfare, saved thousands of American lives, and contributed to victory in one of World War II's most crucial battles. Their legacy lived on in every subsequent conflict where American forces faced entrenched enemies, from Korea to Vietnam to Iraq. Today, the last surviving flamethrower tank from Iwo Jima sits in the National Museum of the Marine Corps in Quantico, Virginia. Tank number 434 bears the scars of its service, welding marks where armor was patched, dents from shell impacts, scratches from volcanic rock. A small plaque notes its specifications and battle history, though it cannot convey the sound of compressed nitrogen releasing, the smell of burning napalm mixed with sulfur, or the sight of liquid fire flowing like water into underground fortresses. The story of these 8 modified Sherman tanks represents the convergence of technology, tactics, and determination that would define American military supremacy for generations to come. They were weapons of their time, necessary evils in a war that demanded total victory, demonstrating that in modern warfare, technological innovation defeats traditional tactics, and imagination triumphs over convention. The flames that consumed Japanese positions on Iwo Jima have long since died. But the revolution they created, the transformation of warfare from individual combat to technological dominance, continues to shape military thinking worldwide.